The sky above Verilion Prime was the color of ambition, clear, unyielding, and wide enough to swallow whole empires. Even at midday, the atmosphere shimmered faintly with the electromagnetic signature of active shielding grids. To the casual eye, it looked serene. But every layer of peace on this world was backed by layers of surveillance, security, and the quiet weight of fear. Beneath that sky, the tri-species Concord was supposed to rewrite the future. It had taken decades of maneuvering, years of bloodshed and negotiation, and millions of lives sacrificed in border wars just to get this summit to happen. Verilion Prime, a neutral world hollowed out and reconstructed by Thalzar terraformers, had been chosen because it had no history, no culture of its own, no allegiance, just a shell of marble, steel, and artificial ecosystems. A blank slate. The perfect illusion of neutrality. Glass spires rose like frozen lightning from the surface of the oceans, their surfaces etched with fractal patterns visible only in ultraviolet. Floating disc halls hovered in delicate precision over sapphire waters. Beneath them, translucent whales bred in captivity swam aimlessly, fed by automated systems and indifferent to the politics above. 100 banners of peace shimmered in the artificial winds, projected as pure light into the sky, the looping glyphs of the Thalzar Dominion, the flowing script of the Kalari Matronates, and the angular glyphs of Earth's interstellar union. Each symbol was carefully coded to convey more than allegiance. They were historical declarations, condensed ideological treatises. If you could read them, they screamed intention louder than any speech. It was all pageantry, every inch a carefully measured display of harmony and control. Peace, performed. Ambassador Catherine Rios stood at the edge of the upper promenade overlooking the central plaza, flanked by ceremonial guards in dress armor that looked good for the cameras but wouldn't stop a pebble at high velocity. Her coat was dark navy with silver trim, tailored to military precision but marked with civilian authority. The shoulder tabs carried 5 golden stars, one for each major colony Earth had lost defending Concord worlds. Not one of them was granted back. She adjusted the collar and scanned the crowd below through her retinal HUD, tuning out Mahajan's voice for a moment as the heads-up display tagged various alien dignitaries with data overlays, faction, loyalty matrix, known diplomatic history. Probability of hostility. A red arc swept across the screen as a Thalzar observation drone glided past. "They're going to offer us trade corridor rights," whispered David Mahajan, her deputy and diplomatic attaché. His voice was low, precise, but his breathing betrayed tension. "They better offer more than that," Rios replied, her voice clipped. "We bled on Talon Rift. We secured the Bastion gates. Without us, the Kalari would be speaking Thalzar High Cant right now. We didn't come here for table scraps." "Kalari gratitude is notoriously short-lived," Mahajan muttered. Rios gave him a look. "They're not the ones setting the trap. This smells of Thalzar rot. Keep your focus." Everyone knew Earth had paid its dues in blood and steel. Humanity had arrived late to the galactic stage, clawing its way into relevance with stubborn resilience and an almost pathological refusal to die quietly. But that made the old empires uneasy. The Thalzar Dominion, with their millennia of bureaucracy and psychic breeding programs, viewed humans like a virus that had evolved teeth. Inside the Concord Hall, layered with tiers of gravity-defying platforms and adorned with hovering sculpture spirals representing past treaties, the delegates took their places. Each platform subtly floated closer or further from the central stage, depending on that faction's status in the current political web. Earth's platform had once hovered near the inner ring. Today, it was 3 levels farther out. A warning. Thalzar envoys wore regalia that bristled with neural nodes and memory spires, their suits designed to record and archive every movement, every word, in real time to be dissected later by political analysts grown in vat nurseries. The lead among them, Imperial Liaison Velithro, stood within human stillness. His frame was vaguely humanoid, but elongated, arms too long, eyes too deep, skin crystalline and faceted like cut glass. He spoke without turning. "Let the record show," Velith began, "that today, the Tri-Species Accord will vote on the legitimacy of human expansion into neutral systems." There it was. The trap. Rios didn't flinch. She could feel the coil of tension behind her ribs, but her face remained stone. This wasn't about trade routes. It was about containment. The Thalzar didn't want humanity as an equal. They wanted us isolated, slow-starving in bureaucratic cages. "Furthermore," Velith said, tilting his head toward the gathering, his voice modulated and dry, We regret to inform the Assembly that a vessel matching human stealth signature was responsible for the detonation that destroyed the relay city of Zavros Tier 3 days ago. The air itself seemed to recoil. Gasps in a dozen dialects. A Kalari matron twisted her sensory fronts in shock. The Mykar representative blinked all 6 of its eyes out of sync. Several factions activated personal shields. Mahajan stepped forward instinctively. That accusation is unsupported. Earth has no stealth-capable ships in that quadrant. We demand immediate access to the... But the room wasn't waiting for facts. A holographic display unfolded from Velitha's robes, projecting footage of a sleek, dark vessel skimming low over a glimmering cityscape, followed by light. Bright, terrible light. The kind that burns histories off maps. The kind that silences bloodlines. Mahajan's voice cracked. That has to be a goddamn fake. Rios said nothing. She saw it now, not the ship in the footage, but the play behind it. The careful timing. The narrative architecture. The Thalzar had been laying the foundation for this spectacle for months, maybe years. Coordinating logistics, seeding distrust, shaping expectations. It was elegant. Surgical. Velith bowed shallowly. Until a full tribunal is assembled, Earth is hereby suspended from all Concord privileges. Trade, diplomacy, and territory claims. Effective immediately. And just like that, a planet of 15 billion souls became galactic pariahs. Rios didn't respond. No defense. No begging. She simply turned, every line of her posture hard as forged steel. 3 hours later, the human delegation was marched to their ship under escort. The promenade had been cleared of civilians. Drones buzzed overhead. Media feeds spun across Ganet channels. Even in shame, the Thalzar knew how to orchestrate a message. Rios looked back once at the spires of Verilion Prime. One of them still smoked faintly, though the clean-up bots had already woven carbon-absorbing lattice across the damage. A scar dressed in silk. Earth's position was fragile. Its outer colonies were resource-rich but underdefended. Its navy was spread thin, rebuilt after a decade of brushfire wars. Its political alliances were recent and brittle. For now, humanity's only strength was its memory, and the wounds it refused to let scar over. In the silence of the shuttle, Mahajan finally broke. This was a setup. A complete setup. Why now? Why this? Rios stared out the viewport. The moons of Verilion hung in delicate balance above the horizon, ringed with defense satellites. Everything in this system looked perfect. Controlled. Lethal. Because we were getting too close, she said. To what? A resource? A diplomatic alliance? What? She turned her head. It doesn't matter. Mahajan exhaled, hands trembling. My sister's on Kalen 6. If trade dries up, if supplies. Rios's tone didn't change, but her eyes softened for half a second. She won't be left to starve. None of them will. He swallowed and nodded, falling silent. Her expression hardened again, but her voice was iron. Now. She leaned forward, eyes burning. Now we prepare the ledger. We find out who clapped when we fell. We find the outcasts, the exiled, the fringe species they thought too broken to matter. And we remind this galaxy what humanity does when it's pushed into a corner. She folded her arms. They started this war with words and shadows. We'll answer in kind. And when the dust settles, they'll remember why humanity was never meant to be caged. Far above, hidden in a Lagrange shadow behind Verilion's outermost moon, a small object shifted position. No larger than a cargo crate, its black surface absorbed almost all incident light. Inside, it was nothing but processors, memory cores, and a single broadcasting antenna locked on a narrowband quantum relay. It had no flag, no markings, but its encryption keys matched Earth. It powered up silently, began to record, then shifted frequencies. It wasn't just listening. It was transmitting coordinates. Earth had already made its move. Earth's orbital station Olympus 1 hung in geosynchronous orbit over the Pacific, a silver-edged sentinel scarred by patchwork repairs and half a dozen modular expansions. It was not the most beautiful construction in human history, nor the most efficient, but it was built for survival. And that made it dangerous. The station bore the weight of 1,000 decisions made in desperation, compromise, or blunt defiance. Each module carried names of colonies lost, battles won, treaties signed under duress. Here, in this place of hard choices and harder consequences, the future was being reshaped. Ambassador Catherine Rios stepped off the shuttle ramp and into the pressurized corridor with the weight of betrayal pressing hard against her shoulders. The steel beneath her boots vibrated with the low-frequency hum of fusion cores and stabilizers. She didn't pause to look out the wide viewport at the stars, or at Earth, which rotated slowly beneath them like a bruised marble. She remembered standing on this same deck years ago, during the Breach Wars, watching ships burn over Europa. The sky had been full of wreckage and guilt. They'd lost half a fleet that day. She'd written the death notices herself. Now the war was quieter, but just as sharp. The welcome was silent. No brass bands, no diplomats. Just security officers in plain armor, faces hard and watchful. The news had already reached home. Earth had been exiled. The footage from Verilion had been dissected on every news feed, rewritten into conspiracy, weaponized by opposition factions, and feared by civilians who didn't yet understand the depth of what it meant. General Abram Solano met her halfway down the corridor, his grim face carved deeper by the gravity of war than by age. He offered no salute, only a nod. "Catherine." "General." He turned and walked with her without another word. They passed sections filled with technicians, old-school military analysts, and even a few retired spies in civilian garb. Olympus 1 had shifted in function over the years. Once a diplomatic relay node, then a civilian research station. Now it was War Command. Every room buzzed with tension and half-spoken orders. "We intercepted the Verilion feed within 20 minutes, Solano said, voice low. "The Concord's already frozen our diplomatic channels. Our embassies are being escorted off-world. Trade routes are collapsing. We've lost contact with 3 outer colonies." "Which ones?" "Kalen 6, Idris Reach, and Bastion Delta. The Kalari haven't answered our pings. The Thalzar did more than sabotage a summit. They broke the system." Rios clenched her jaw. Mahajun would want to hear about Kalen 6 himself. His sister was still posted there, chief xenobotanist in a colony with no defensive fleet and dwindling hydroponics. "We need to assume they'll keep pushing," she said. This wasn't a warning. It was the opening move. "What do you want to do?" She stopped walking, looked him in the eye. "Enact the exile doctrine." Solano's expression didn't flicker, but a subtle stillness crept into his frame. "That's a cold protocol. It hasn't been opened since the Breach Wars. Because no one ever thought we'd be betrayed from within the Concord. We're not dealing with a military invasion. We're dealing with a surgical narrative kill, something designed to isolate us, fracture us, and make us desperate." He hesitated. "Our analysts believe the Thalzar may be preparing to declare a protectorate over our border systems, using the chaos as pretext." "Then we'll burn the pretext," Rios said. Quietly. "Precisely. We have the assets. We have the fail-safes. Activate them." He studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded. "It'll take time. Some of the cells are deep. Others aren't even on the books anymore. Some of our agents haven't reported in years." "That's fine," Rios said. "Time is a weapon, General. So is misdirection." Earth itself felt different. The cities still stood. The skyways still thrummed with traffic. The orbital elevators still glowed at night. But the air held tension, palpable, electric, like the heaviness before a thunderstorm. People still worked, laughed, fought, survived, but always with one eye on the sky. Rios stood on the balcony of her old office in Geneva, the sky over Europe dark with storm clouds and shuttle trails. Below her, crowds had gathered in silent protest. Not angry, not yet, just watching the embassy tower where the Thalzar sigil had once hung. It had been taken down hours after the broadcast. Burned. A wind swept across the plaza, carrying the scent of ash and ozone. Across the continents, similar scenes played out in Johannesburg, New Quebec, Sao Paulo, Yaroslavl, and orbital enclaves over Luna and Mars. Humanity wasn't unified, not exactly, but it was galvanized. Mahajun stood beside her, data slate in hand. His face was pale, voice strained. "Kalen 6 is holding. Barely. They've rationed food stocks. Atmospheric stabilizers are running on backup. Their governor declared planetary autonomy. Said if Earth can't protect them, they'll protect themselves." Rios said nothing, just nodded. The words weren't unexpected, but they still dug like a blade. Every colony that declared autonomy weakened Earth's legitimacy. The Concord would use that to argue humanity had fractured itself. Mahajun hesitated. "The exile doctrine, we're actually doing it?" "We are. And more." She turned toward him. Her voice dropped into something sharp, surgical. "I want you to coordinate with Deep Signal. Get in touch with everyone Concord forgot. Former smugglers. Disgraced envoys. Species the Thalzar cut out of the Accord generations ago. Exiles. Scavengers. I want assets who understand the black zones, the dust worlds. I want ghosts. Mahajun blinked. They're unstable. Half of them hate us. So do the Thalzar. At least the ghosts remember what it's like to be hunted. We'll deal with the rest. Start with Hades Station. Use cold ciphers. And Mahajun. Yes, ma'am. Don't come back with excuses. Come back with leverage. Hades Station hung in the shadows of the asteroid belt like a tomb that forgot to be buried. Once, it had been a mining relay, then a surveillance node during the breach wars. Now it was neither. Its exterior was a patchwork of stolen hull panels and retrofitted alloy plating. Its power systems barely coherent, strung together by overlapping code bases and synthetic minds that had learned to lie. Its population, 17 humans, for synthetics, and a single defector from a species whose name had been classified since before the Accord was written. They had no flag, no allies. But when the message came through, they answered. Encrypted. Obsolete codes wrapped in sublayered metaphors, piggybacked on dead military frequencies. Earthseal 471 Omega. Known only to former operatives. Buried deep. And yet it was enough. They didn't ask questions. They packed weapons. Powered long-dead relay buoys. Recalibrated asteroid sensors. Opened black market comms. One of them, a woman with half a face of carbon scars and a prosthetic larynx, spoke into the dark. Signal confirmed. Earth calls the lost. Time to answer. On the far side of Luna, in an unlisted station embedded within a crater too irradiated to host civilian life, a meeting took place in shadows. 8 individuals. Not military. Not government. They were remnants of the Directorate, the old intelligence framework before Earth was allowed a seat at the Concord. Most of them were ghosts on paper. One was legally dead. 2 had never existed to begin with. The room was dark except for a single blue screen. When Rios's image appeared, she didn't greet them. She didn't ask for permission. They've cast us out, she said. So we're going to stop asking for doors. We'll build our own. And we'll make the Concord knock on our threshold. One of the shadows leaned forward. With what? The economy's brittle. Public morale is fraying. Our fleet's undergunned. Not for war, Rios replied. Not yet. For influence. Trade. Information. Smuggling routes. Refugee corridors. We carve out a new web from the fragments they discarded. We make Earth indispensable again. Not because they trust us, but because they can't function without us. A long pause. Then another voice spoke, heavy with cynicism. You're asking us to rebuild the world out of its ruins. Rios didn't blink. I'm asking you to bury the old one and build something no one can exile again. Another leaned back, voice gravel thick. And the Thalzar? We cut their narrative to pieces. One lie at a time. We leak their secrets, flip their agents, find their fault lines. And when the moment comes, we show the galaxy the cost of betrayal. Silence. Then nods. The exile doctrine was no longer a contingency. It was doctrine. And humanity, cornered, wounded, and furious, was now playing by different rules. The ship wasn't supposed to exist. Cloaked in magnetic dispersal fields and stitched together from the bones of scrapped dreadnoughts, the Morning Star drifted in the dead space between solar interference zones. It didn't broadcast. It didn't answer hails. It had no transponder signature, no active registry, and no known home port. It was part war relic, part myth. Whispers told of it appearing in lost systems, offering sanctuary to the abandoned, and vanishing before Concord patrols could lock triangulation. Now, it waited in the dark. And Ambassador Catherine Rios stood aboard it, surrounded by things the galaxy had tried to erase. The chamber she stood in wasn't a bridge. It was more like a shrine. Half the room was carved from the remains of a Calvarin War altar, the other from scavenged human naval plating. The floor was mismatched alloy, some etched with memory circuits, others scorched from orbital burns. Dim ultraviolet runes glowed at uneven intervals across the walls, their flickering cadence more ritual than functional. Holographic symbols floated midair, not standard Galnet glyphs, but crude, tribal code splices recognizable only to those who had survived the pre-Accord cycles. The air was cold, not naturally, but by environmental design. The temperature served as both symbolism and requirement. Many aboard were species whose physiology rejected Concord standard warmth. Here, cold was unity. The figure seated at the center of the shrine was massive, cloaked in layers of black feathered robes that twitched with thought and neural impulse. Their mask was bone, aged, yellowed, and carved with thin channels where ritual blood once ran. Catherine Rios kept her breath steady. Rios of Earth, the voice hissed. Not in her ear, but inside her skull. A telepathic resonance, raw and unfiltered. It wasn't a question. It was an invocation. She nodded. Korth Vayak, last speaker of the Mirrored Wing, exiled by the Thalzar after refusing planetary sterilization. I read your tribunal record. There was a long pause. The silence pressed against her like atmospheric pressure. Did you read what I said before they broke my wings? I did. Word for word. The feathered figure shifted slightly. 1,000 razor-thin plumes rustled in response. Then, you wish alliance. I do. Another pause. This one colder. You want vengeance. She didn't deny it. And survival. The psychic weight receded slightly. Respect. Or interest. Others will not trust you, said Vayak. Earth is new to pain. Rios let her eyes scan the room before answering. Over a dozen shapes stood or drifted along the periphery. Alien bodies altered by exile and augmentation. Sealed suits hiding physiology so divergent it would induce shock in most humans. Some bore the marks of genetic castes collapsed by Concord policy. Others were sapient hybrids declared abominations. There was even a translucent sphere of folded light, an evolved AI encased in quantum gel, its thoughts vibrating across 10 dimensions. A skeletal figure composed of mineral and fungal interfaces clutched a weathered stone pendant, the last relic of a species whose atmosphere had been stripped under Concord sanction. Nearby, a hulking quadruped with lattice skin armor carried a wound that had never closed, a bio-fusion breach that left half its torso glowing and raw. She turned back to Vayak. Earth is new to forgetting, she said. We don't do it easily, and we don't forgive when the knife is still in our back. The room reacted, not overtly, but with small movements, exchanges of pheromones, chemical signals, subtle flashes of bioluminescence. Interest, curiosity, recognition. Then speak, Vayak said. Speak what Earth brings to the broken. Rios stepped forward. We bring something simple. Not fleets. Not weapons. Not promises of glory. We bring truth. Ugly, raw, and unfiltered. The Concord is not balance. It is not peace. It is preservation of hierarchy. Of silence. The Thalzar did not exile you to protect the galaxy. They did it to erase their own failures. She pulled a slender cylinder from her coat. Activated it. Holograms snapped into the air. Images of Zavro's tear before the blast. Then after. Then overlays of communication traffic from Concord sectors 30 minutes before the explosion. Supposedly encrypted. Supposedly impossible to intercept. The Broken watched. This, Rios said, voice calm but sharp, was not an accident. It was not a rogue act. It was a framed job, surgical, political, and perfectly timed. Earth bled to stabilize the outer rim. And when we asked for equal footing, they decided our survival was too inconvenient. A deep mechanical groan echoed. A being emerged, part biological, part living debris, its eyelenses clicking in a synchronized spiral. The last time someone spoke like this, it rasped. 30 systems burned. We trusted fire before. It devoured us. Rios swallowed. Her throat tightened, but she didn't falter. That's why we don't burn this time. We undermine. Another figure moved closer. Insectoid, tall, clicking mandibles beneath a breathing apparatus. And what would you have us do, human? Return to war? Burn stars for pride. We are ghosts, not heroes. Rios met its eyes. For a moment, she hesitated. Not out of fear, but out of memory. She saw again the face of Captain Ewan, dead in the breach of the Seraphiel, her last words drowned in vacuum. She remembered the final broadcast of Earth's ambassador to the Concord, the calm dignity in his voice before he was cut off mid-sentence by orbital fire. I'm not asking you to fight for Earth, she said. Her voice cracked, but she let it. I'm asking you to help us make sure no one else disappears in silence again. Vayak leaned forward, eyes burning. You would turn whispers into war. No, Rios said. We'll turn whispers into thunder. The Concord lives off perception. Consensus. We don't need to fire a single shot. just fracture their control. Trade leaks. Testimony. Proxy disruptions. Political weight, carefully placed. We don't burn their world. We pull out the keystones. The silence that followed was long. Then, slowly, Vayak extended a taloned hand toward a pillar at the edge of the shrine. One by one, the others followed suit. Claw, pseudopod, metal limb. Each pressed their mark against the pillar. Then speak your pact, Vayak said. Rios stepped forward, placed her hand on the pillar. The encoded slate in her pocket vibrated. Recognition of ancient code etched into the altar itself. No gods, no thrones, no lies, only memory and fire. The words rippled through the chamber. The pact had been made. Hours later, Rios sat alone in a temporary quarter aboard the Morning Star, lights dimmed, gravity set to Earth norm. She hadn't spoken since the rite ended. Her fingers traced the edge of a patch sewn into her coat. UN's squad emblem. Just fabric, but weighted like lead. Mahajan's voice filtered through on the encrypted link. We're getting signals from the Scorn Drift. 2 outlier captains flagged the Concord supply chain breach you leaked. They want in. She didn't smile, but her eyes narrowed. Tell them the broken are real. And Earth remembers. In the core systems, at the edge of Thalzar Dominion territory, a Concord listening post flagged a burst of encrypted traffic rippling from the Scorn Drift through 6 blind relay points. The signal wasn't military, but it carried a dead language in its metadata. Human. They sent a quiet alert to Verilion Prime. It was ignored. By the time the Dominion realized something was wrong, 6 forgotten names were trending on Galnet. Tribunals reopened. Victim logs recompiled. Questions asked. The broken had spoken, and the galaxy was listening. The Kalari archive city of Eschenval stood like a crown atop the cliffs of a broken moon, its towers of bioluminescent coral glass humming softly in low gravity. Built during the age of 20 Veils, it was one of the oldest continuous memory vaults in the quadrant. The Kalari did not write history. They cultivated it, grown in crystalline matrices, folded into fractal songs, and woven into living architecture. Every building, every corridor, every ceremonial artifact was a vessel of truth. To erase data, here was treason. To falsify it was sacrilege, which made what Rios was about to do all the more heretical. She moved through the outer data sanctum draped in ceremonial gray, the robes of a first witness, a title borrowed through old favors and precise blackmail. Mahajan walked beside her, his movements more hesitant. The hood he wore shadowed his features, but his posture betrayed him, coiled, wary, out of place. They were surrounded by Kalari monks with wide, frilled heads and translucent skin that shimmered with biofeedback pulses. The Kalari communicated with more than words. Every shift in emotional temperature rippled across their bodies, colors that meant sorrow, tension, disbelief. And in this moment, Rios saw them flicker with muted hues of distrust. Are we sure about this? Mahajan whispered as they passed a corridor inscribed with living runes pulsing in time with the moon's tidal heartbeat. No, Rios replied without looking at him. But we're committed. The sanctum doors opened. A rush of colder air greeted them. Inside, luminescent lines traced along the walls in organic spirals. Floating archive beads hovered in meditative orbits around data pillars. No light came from artificial bulbs, only from memory. A single Kalari archivist awaited them, Master Elshinver, its fronds woven with silver rings of age and service. It stood motionless at the base of the central spire. A pair of memory drones flanked it, quivering with latent resonance. It studied Rios for a long time before speaking, its voice a cascade of chord whispers that resonated in the bones more than the ears. You should not be here, human. Your species is exiled. Rios lowered her hood, eyes steady. Which is exactly why we're here. We have something the Concord forgot how to value. A story with teeth. She reached into her coat and set a data prism on the altar, a slim, 3-faceted device that pulsed with deep red light. The moment it touched the altar, the air changed. The sanctuary grew still. Inside the prism, the unredacted tribunal logs of the mirrored wing. The Thalzar's cover-up of the sterilization order. Testimonies of broken species that had never been allowed to speak at the Accord. Surveillance captures. Black-letter executive memos with biometric signatures. The prism pulsed once. Then again. The chamber lights dimmed as the altar synced with the prism's security glyphs. Even Mahajan flinched as flickers of images, burning cities, orbital detonations, stripped colonies, reflected on the sanctum walls. "Where did you get this?" Elshinvar asked. "From the ones you all chose to forget," Rios said. The Kalari stepped closer. Its skin flickered, uncertainty, then sorrow, then something deeper. Rage, muted by centuries of diplomacy. "If we house this, it will be seen as treason." "Then don't house it," Rios said. "Share it. Leak it. Send it to every archive subnode. To every historian in the quadrant. We don't need your permission. We need your network. You underestimate what the Thalzar will do. I've seen what they do. That's why this matters." For a long time, Elshinvar said nothing. A dozen archive orbs hovered in the air around them, chiming with silent queries. Memory loops sinking. Tension held in the breathless equilibrium of the moment. Then the Kalari turned away. Its fronds folded inward. "Leave it here. If it is truth, it will root. If not, it will die." Rios gave a slow nod. "That's all we ask." 12 hours later, the Virilian diplomatic net was on fire. 3 independent archivists from neutral systems confirmed the authenticity of the logs. The Mirrored Wing had not rebelled. They had resisted a direct genocide order. The Concord had buried it. The Thalzar had authorized the silence. Ambassadors began issuing denials. Some factions demanded a war tribunal. Others blamed Earth for manipulated leaks. Concord's Central Communication Council scrambled to control the narrative. But the damage had already rooted. Eschenval's prism logs were mirrored over a dozen light paths, archived and time-stamped in quadruplicate. Even if the Concord tried to erase it, the red words had spread. In orbit over Bastion Delta, a freelance media ship broadcast the logs live, narrating over every page with emotionless translation AI. Viewership broke all known records. Children of the Broken wept in public plazas. A riot sparked in the Hall of Treaty Flame on Laura's station. Everywhere, truth ignited rage. And while the diplomats argued, a single stealth courier, disguised as an interfaith medical transport, drifted past a border beacon near the Thalzar archive planet of Ikor Delta. A dead world wrapped in data towers, where the Empire stored its version of history. Inside the courier, 3 saboteurs trained by the Directorate, and a black packet containing every redacted file Earth had ever stolen from the Concord over the past 73 years. Not to destroy the Thalzar, to drown them in truth. On Earth, in the subterranean vaults of Olympus 1, Rios stood before a holomap lit with cascading diplomatic fallout patterns. Each pulse of red indicated a system where unrest had been sparked by the leak. A third of the map was red. Mahajan stepped beside her, shaking his head. "We've been contacted by 4 more factions. 2 want guarantees. 1 wants weapons. 1 wants to defect entirely." "Which one?" "The Krask enclaves. They're minor, but deep logistics experts. They control 4 Concord fuel depots." Rios stared at the map. "Then we give them sanctuary. Publicly. That'll push the Thalzar into open sanction. I'm counting on it." She leaned on the edge of the holodable. For a moment, her face was reflected in the curved screen. Tired, hard, older than she had looked even a month ago. "Let them tighten the noose," she said. "The harder they pull, the more allies will slip through their fingers." She tapped a control node. The map zoomed out. In the darkness, red bled outward like spreading fire. The silent war had begun, and Earth, for the first time in centuries, was winning. It started in the margins, not with warships, not with orbital strikes, with paper, with silence, with things that didn't move the way they should. Freighters registered under obsolete neutral flags began skipping inspections. Unmarked cargo vessels slipped through unpatrolled systems, rerouting without clearance and vanishing off long-range scans. Tariffs rose on basic goods, then fell without explanation. Commodity prices destabilized not from planetary supply failures, but from whispers of shortages, of embargoes, of bribes too large to ignore. The Thalzar called it economic interference. Earth called it strategy. Olympus 1's Strategic Trade Operations Command was less than a month old. It didn't exist on any official organizational tree. Even inside Olympus 1, it was just Deck 45, logistics support. The old observation lounge had been stripped of its panoramic wall, replaced with projectors, encrypted link tunnels, and a battalion of ex-smugglers, gray market accountants, and defected trade auditors. Half the room spoke in code. The other half didn't speak at all. Rios stood at the central console, watching the arterial grid glow with dynamic pulses. Each line represented a Concord trade route. The red ones had been seized. The yellow ones were under silent pressure. The black ones had gone dark. Deniable operations, nothing in writing. "We've seized 3 redistribution nodes in the far reach," said Sato, a former Martian convoy captain who'd once run weapons to both sides of a Jovian embargo. He leaned over the display, tapping icons with a grease-blackened fingertip. "Kavari exchange is down. Gala shipping's in our pocket. If they want fresh polymer, they're buying it through our shelf fronts." Mahajun crossed his arms, eyes scanning the data stream. The Concord's trying to fast-track reroutes, but their logistics AI is tuned for efficiency under trust. We're forcing it to think like a criminal. It can't keep up. Concord trade was built on legacy trust chains, mutual verification layers, governed by centralized regulatory nodes and decades of stabilized routes. It was efficient, but rigid, designed for peace. For control. Rios nodded. Then we increase the pressure. Disrupt quietly. Bleed them slowly. No explosions. No declarations. Just shortages. She gestured at the map, a web of hyperlane jumps, merchant corridors, and nexus hubs. Most of the inner core systems glowed green, but cracks were spidering outward. One trade artery blinked black. "What's that?" she asked. Sato leaned in. His face darkened. "That is the Morgellan corridor, the Thalzar's primary fuel route into the inner core worlds. We've never touched it. Not even pirates go near it. It's sacred territory to them, like a royal artery." Rios stared at it a long moment. "Tom, we made them nervous. Put a team on it. Just shadow. Don't strike." Mahajun raised a brow. "You want to bait them into defending their strongest artery? I want them to overextend. Every freighter they divert, every credit they spend fortifying a corridor, is one less they use silencing dissent." Varnak 4 was a breadbasket moon, small, temperate, with orbital hydroponics fields that could feed 3 sectors. Its Concord-designated convoy was guarded by 2 corvettes, marked with standard diplomatic clearance. It never made it to its destination. It didn't explode. It didn't vanish. It just stopped responding. By the time the escort ships backtracked, the convoy had been emptied of cargo and left drifting in a quiet Lagrange pocket. There were no human signatures, no emissions, just 3 lines carved into the hull with plasma tools. "We do not starve alone." On the trade moons of Surat Prime, the next scandal detonated. Containers marked as grain seed for border colonies were found to contain inert polymer bricks, perfect replicas in mass and thermal profile. The revelation cratered 3 commodity markets in less than 6 hours. The Thalzar accused Earth of black market manipulation. Rios never issued a denial. Instead, she leaked a single image, a former Concord freighter, now bearing the colors of the broken, delivering real grain seed to a decommissioned colony flagged for abandonment. The caption read only, "We feed what you discard." The message spread faster than the image. It was picked up by fringe networks, protest groups, and colony relief orgs who had always known the Concord was willing to let them rot if it meant stability. They saw Earth as what it had always been, unruly, unwanted, and utterly necessary. On that abandoned colony, a child in a ragged mask watched the freighter unload. His mother wept openly beside the crates. Around them, hands moved with the urgency of survival, soil stirred, seeds distributed, irrigation lines spliced with salvaged tubing. The crates bore no banner, only a stamped phrase in 13 languages. No one left to starve. The war wasn't fought with weapons, but the body count was real. On Brinvar 3, medical shipments failed to arrive. 27 died in a plague that could have been treated. On Kirabelt Station, oxygen filters sold at 10 times normal price. Riots flared, then stabilized under the promise of Earth-controlled supply. And behind every shifting credit balance, behind every vanished convoy and phantom cargo manifest, Earth moved. The broken moved. The Concord tried to retaliate. They issued formal trade sanctions. They revoked Earth's restricted license to use public jump gates. They attempted to block the movement of supply ships by calling for embargo enforcement from member states. But the member states were bleeding too. And their own people were asking, why is Earth feeding our colonies while Concord stalls? No answer came. Because the Concord had never been built to compete. It had been built to control. And Earth, now feral, decentralized, and politically radioactive, wasn't playing by the same rules anymore. In a hidden meeting beneath the dunes of Relcor, 3 minor factions gathered with Earth diplomats. All had once been loyal to the Thalzar Economic Council. The delegates arrived in sealed transports, under falsified names. Rios attended in a plain cloak, flanked by a single bodyguard and a crate of ration packs. "You want us to shift our freight lanes under your protection?" asked one. A tall, scaled being from the Ventari Combine. "No," Rios said. "I want you to admit you don't have any protection left, and that if you wait for Concord approval, your people will starve. You want bribes?" Rios opened the crate. Inside, grain, antibiotics, fuel cells, and encryption-grade subspace routers. "I want partnership and memory. The next time the Concord tries to bury the truth, you'll already have the tools to share it." The delegates stared. None answered. Not with words. They signed the trade accord the next morning. On Olympus 1, Mahajun entered Rios's office with a datapad in hand and disbelief on his face. "You need to see this." She took the pad. On the screen, a memo from inside the Thalzar Economic Bureau. Internal only. Flag critical. Recommended action. Consider negotiated access to Earth-aligned networks to avoid collapse of secondary supply chain. She stared at the words for a long moment. "Do we have a leak inside their bureau?" she asked. Mahajun hesitated. "Not exactly. This was broadcast on their internal redundancy net. Someone inside wanted it found." Rios leaned back in her chair, exhaustion momentarily eclipsed by a dark, electric joy. But under it, a colder thought stirred. "They're breaking," she thought. "But not because we're better. Because they never learned to be hungry. We're not just bleeding them." "No," Mahajun said. "They're hemorrhaging." She turned back to the viewport. Below, Earth turned slowly in the dark. The planet that had clawed its way out of obscurity now held a knife at the throat of the stars, and it hadn't even drawn blood. "We haven't fired a shot," she said. "But they're the ones losing ground." The trade wars had begun, and Earth, unwanted, underestimated, and undeniably rising, had turned economics into insurgency. The Concord met in closed session, not on Verilion Prime, which still trembled with unrest and was now encircled by orbital protest barges, but in orbit above Thalzar territory, aboard the Unity Bastion, a diplomatic fortress the size of a small moon. Forged of memory metal and shielded in 12 spectrums, the Bastion was where the galaxy's elite came to preserve the illusion of order. There were no windows, no external communications, and no decorative emblems. Unity, the architects claimed, had no need of aesthetics. It was a place built to absorb dissent, not amplify it. A place where truths were bent into policy. 37 factions. 37 seats. One remained conspicuously empty. The Earth seat. It had not been erased. That would have been too overt. Concord Protocol insisted the chair remain, a symbol of the Accord's generosity. A gesture of potential forgiveness. A reminder that Earth could still return, if it begged. But among the inner circle, it was not seen as benevolence. It had become something else entirely. A threat display. Here is the cost of disobedience. Here is the vacuum a rogue leaves behind. Only, this time, the vacuum wasn't silent. Across the galaxy, Earth's absence had grown louder than any speech. Rios' trade revolution, the slow, deliberate bleeding of Concord economic dominance, was reshaping the galactic balance of power in real time. Where once Concord supply chains flowed in smooth, predictable loops, now they stuttered, rerouted, and hemorrhaged credits into black market hands. Shadow Accords, emergency requisitions, rogue fleets offering humanitarian relief under veiled banners. What the Concord had long feared was no longer hypothetical. Earth was not returning. It was replacing them. At first, the high seats laughed. The humans were playing scavenger games, they said. Dignity would outlast desperation. Let them sow seeds. They couldn't harvest them in a war. Then came the votes. At the Rim Assembly on Telvaris, for minor factions abstained from the annual Concord budget review. In coded subtext, they cited economic neutrality until humanitarian support became equitable across state lines. In the Calvith Coalition, where 7 Concord-aligned systems once policed trade levies. The local governorate declared a restructured customs tier that recognized Earth-affiliated merchant vessels as provisional entities of non-hostile function. And on the broken moons of Lushan, where the Concord once stored surplus arms in cryovaults, activists stormed depots and used Earth signal flares to mark their new allegiances. On Oshelix, a world of silicon-bonded sentience, the algorithmic consensus of 5 refused to publish its annual trade surplus numbers for the first time in recorded memory, citing data volatility due to uncontrolled humanitarian variance. It wasn't war. It was fracture, and it was accelerating. Inside Unity Bastion's central hall, a colossal, hexagonal chamber formed of light-bending alloys and gravitational equilibrium anchors, the delegates gathered. Each seat floated in orbital synchronization around the central speaker platform, a tradition borrowed from the early orbital councils on Orvesh. Delegates of water worlds arrived in atmosphere pods. Methane breathers wore containment fields. Every word was filtered through auto-translation glyphs and cultural normalization arrays. Ambassador Velith Rowe of the Thalzar Dominion stood at the center ring. His crystalline body gleamed beneath layers of dark reflective armor. He did not move with speed or aggression. He moved with authority. Measured, deliberate, cold. The longer we permit this disruption to persist, he intoned, his voice sharpened by decades of perfected cadence, the more we validate chaos. Earth's activities are not merely rogue. They are destabilizing the core architecture of peace. His eyes, multifaceted and tinted with artificial depth fields, scanned the delegates one by one. From the Kalari delegation, a ripple of frond coloration signaled thoughtfulness, not agreement. Their delegation, once stalwart in upholding Concord codes, had grown increasingly reticent. Then came the voice from the Mycard depth clade. It rolled through the chamber like gravel poured into water, resonating from deep within its aquatic life support shell. Peace built on starvation, it muttered. Perhaps that architecture needs new beams. A few delegates shifted in their chairs. A hivekin cluster blinked their facial thorax lights in unsynchronized bursts, a clear sign of discomfort. The Shelavari envoy, whose species communicated emotion through scent, exhaled a burst of bitter myrrh into its containment field. Velith turned slowly. You would embrace anarchy? I would embrace honesty, the Mycar replied. The humans deal in truth and grain. You deal in delay. Silence fell. It was not the silence of indecision. It was the silence of recognition. For the first time in decades, Velith Rowe did not control the room. He felt it in the slight delay between his words and the next response. He felt it in the lack of eye contact, the way the air cooled incrementally as atmospheric calibrators adjusted to new emotional tones. Even his internal delegates, the ones assigned to reaffirm his statements with interjections, remained still. He was alone in the current. The Earth seat sat at the outer ring. A curved frame of polished metal, its back etched with human language translations of the Concord Charter. No human had touched it in months. Its surface remained undisturbed. Until now, a small courier drone arrived. It descended in perfect silence, cloaked in basic diplomatic priority credentials, unarmed, unflagged, and encoded with open session acceptance keys. It bypassed 3 layers of security glyphs without resistance. Delegates turned. It landed gently on the armrest of the Earth seat. The drone unfurled. A single crystalline data chip unfolded from its core. The chair glowed faint red. And then the message began to play. It was not a transmission. It was a voice. Human. Female. Calm. Clear. Rios. You held your seat above us like a collar. You called it peace. You called it order. The audio was uncompressed. No distortions. Her words echoed across the diplomatic nexus. We call it what it is, control. A flicker passed through the Kalari's fronds. The Mycar froze. Even Velith's head tilted by a fraction of a degree. We do not seek return, she said. We do not beg for approval. We do not kneel. And we will not forget. Delegates began looking at each other. The Hivekin's facial lights blinked in tight, reverent pulses. The Shelavari's exhaled scent shifted, now citrus and iron. A quorum of Rosh spores drifted from their nutrient tanks and congealed into a unity spiral, a gesture of emerging consensus. If your systems want bread, we'll trade. If they want lies, let them stay hungry. Then came the final glyph. It shimmered above the data chip. A phrase, a threat, a prophecy. A seat refused is a kingdom born. The chamber did not erupt. It fractured. Half the delegates rose in protest. A third stayed silent, eyes darting, calculating. And the rest? They leaned back into their seats, turned off their mics, and began to wonder what they might gain from silence, and from leaving the Concord before Earth's ledger reached their names. Because in that moment, every power in the galaxy understood. Earth had not asked for war. It had offered a deal, and the Concord, paralyzed by its own weight, had nothing left to offer in return. Because by then, even the neutral systems knew. Ashes were falling in orbit, but for once, the fire burned upward. In Olympus One's upper ring, behind the sealed doors of Strategic Hall Theta, Rios stood alone beneath the vaulted holomap of the Orion expansion corridor. Echo 7 had run its course. The probes were burning out. The dead had spoken. But now came the harder part, making the living listen. Strategic Hall Theta was carved from basalt and black iron, a place not meant for comfort, but for permanence. The air always carried a metallic bite, purified too many times, touched by too many decisions that altered planetary trajectories. She didn't speak. Not yet. Behind her, Mahajan entered, silent for a long moment. He stopped beside her, hands tucked behind his back. They've begun redlining system-level audits in Concord Bureau 10, he said quietly. Someone high up wants a scapegoat. They'll have a line of volunteers, Rios murmured. It's safer than admitting the foundation's cracked. She zoomed the map outward. Dozens of star systems flickered in real time. A dozen blinked yellow, aligned, but wavering. 3 more glowed red. Not hostile. Embattled. Waiting. Others, the quiet ones, had begun sending encrypted pulses. No demands. No flags. Just a question pulsing at the edge of each signal. Are you still listening? Have they responded to our proposal? The Kinzathi delegation sent back a question, Mahajan said. They want to know what a Black Accord is. Rios finally turned. Her eyes were rimmed with fatigue, but her voice had not lost its edge. Tell them it's what comes after treaties are written in ash. Mahajan hesitated. You know, if they sign on to this, they paint a target on their back. Their own council might collapse. Rios gave a small nod. I know. He watched her a moment longer. We're not just rewriting diplomacy, Kat. We're redefining rebellion. I'm aware, she said. And I'll carry that sin. Someone has to. She stepped away from the map, her footsteps echoing in the chamber. Prepare the files. Not the polished ones, the raw history. Every line we've kept sealed. Every whisper we haven't dared transmit. Mahajan nodded slowly. And the others? We don't ask for unity, Rios said. We ask for memory. If they share it, they're ready. In the habitat rings above Olympus 1, people gathered. Some watched from common halls with breath caught in their throats. Some wept. Others lit flames in offering bowls, a gesture borrowed from Earth's oldest myths and mingled now with new rites. Symbolic, half-remembered, wholly sacred. On a balcony in Ring 12, an old man named Phalek, once a freight navigator, once loyal to Concord, lit a vial of memory wax and whispered names he'd hidden for decades. He spoke for no camera, no tribunal. He spoke because it was finally allowed. And across the stars, similar scenes unfolded. On the breeding worlds of the Ithari, Hive sisters linked in neural chorus began to recite every disappeared drone from their clutch books, their synchronized minds trembling with collective pain. On Telnari's ocean cities, the Tide Temples sang resonance hymns once banned under Concord cultural standardization laws. The water glowed. The people knelt. Memory, at last, had been uncaged. Rios stood in the upper command spire, looking down through a transparent alloy viewport. Beyond the curve of Olympus 1, Earth rose, scarred, beautiful, uncompromising. A world that had been pushed to the galactic margins. A world that was now unignorable. Mahajan, she said quietly. He looked up. Send the packet to the Kinzathi. Include everything from the Langurst massacre, the hollowing of the Narsheen belt, and the Terran Hollow purges. That's the unfiltered list. It's the real one. If they want to join the Black Accord, they don't get curated outrage. They get the weight. And if they leak it? Rios turned, face calm but tired. Then we move faster. There's no path left that doesn't cost us. She rested a hand briefly on the viewport, I used to think the truth would be enough, she said. Now I think it's the only weapon left that still matters. In the dark above Rast, the stars did not mourn. They bore witness. And now, so did the galaxy. The next war would not be fought in silence. It would begin with witnesses. The message arrived in code older than the Concorde itself. Burst transmission. Narrowband. Line of sight relay. It came through the mouth of a dying pulsar, bounced between 3 derelict relay stations, filtered through an antique encryption algorithm once used by human resistance networks during the early post-reconciliation era. The signal's final bounce off a gravity-split asteroid halo delivered it straight into the outer perimeter of Olympus 1's secure net, flagged not by its signature, but by its style. No official government could trace it. Most wouldn't recognize it. Rios did. She read it in silence from her private terminal, each word stamped into the message like iron pressed to coal. We accept. The wait is ours. Black Accord initiated. The Kinzathi had answered. Not with conditions. Not with hesitation. With fire. The Kinzathi had never been considered a power. Their star cluster, frayed and gravity shredded by a long-extinct binary, supported no major trade networks. Their ships were older than Concorde military archives. Their architecture was vertical and ritualistic, designed not for defense, but for memory. And yet, the Kinzathi remembered everything. They spoke through kinetic song, clicking their claws against ossified thoracic plates to compose meaning. But when they joined the Black Accord, they sent no music. Only the glyph. A vertical line, cleaved cleanly through the center by a chisel mark. Their ancient symbol for burden carried together. Olympus 1 accepted the signal in full. No translation needed. Strategic Hall Theta was no longer quiet. Screens buzzed with movement across 10 sectors. Trade routes shimmered with new trajectories, some clean, others marked with static and ghost ships. Diplomats rotated through in staggered shifts, but none were granted full access. The Black Accord wasn't Concorde law. It was something far older, consensus through reckoning. By week's end, 4 more factions had joined. The Venery clans, who still bore the scars of the venial culling. The Score and Holdfast, whose ice colonies were erased by an orbital misfire Concorde never acknowledged. The Dethel Nestlink, descendants of a migratory people forced into sterilization corridors. Even the mute sculptors of Salasor, who had never signed a single accord since the stars burned blue, sent a shard encoded with their symbol, a broken chain bound in fireglass. Each brought their own testimony. Some delivered memory. Others, names. One brought a ship. The Verity's blade had once served as a Concorde peacekeeper frigate, a gleaming symbol of interstellar law. Now it docked under a human banner, its hull scorched, its registry scrubbed. Inside its hold, stolen archives. Pages of war trials erased before record. Communication logs of dissenters turned to silence. A single hard-light sculpture of a burning treaty, etched with 3 words. You were warned. Mahajun stared at the artifact. What do we do with all of it, he asked. Rios stood in the archive chamber below Olympus 1, watching a dozen memory cubes pulse inside containment arrays. The room felt alive, like the past was humming. We don't weaponize it, she said. We illuminate with it. Not to destroy, yet. To unify the forgotten. Mahajun turned slowly, his expression weary. They're going to come for us harder now. She nodded. Then we make sure every blow they throw lands on 1,000 truths they tried to bury. He ran a hand over one of the containment field switches. It thrummed with potential. And the Black Accord? What happens when we stop counting members and start counting enemies? Rios didn't flinch. She stepped closer to a cube, one labeled Orvesh Final Logs. Her reflection warped in the soft glow. Then we'll know it's working. The Black Accord had no flag, no anthem, no hierarchy. But it had power. Power born not of military strength, but of memory convergence. In less than 2 cycles, encrypted traffic among the member systems outpaced Concorde's core diplomatic stream. They weren't discussing defense plans. They were building consensus chains, interlinked testimonies bound by shared data integrity hashes. The data was open source, but mirrored across culturally unique formats. Holograms, scent vaults, kinetic glyphs, neural seed strings. No single species owned the record. Every system housed a piece of it. Each testimony was verified by quorum. To falsify one node was to contradict dozens more. Lies couldn't propagate. They fractured under scrutiny. The truth could no longer be deleted. It was too scattered, too witnessed. On the trade hub of Pharaoh's Dan, an old miners' union began streaming the raw contents of the Dethel gene sterilization orders onto civilian news feeds. On Wekthats, a neutral world once used as a trial site for Concorde orbital weapon tests, the Planetary Council voted unanimously to declassify their medical archives. And on Earth, the old lunar bastion broadcast a signal to every Black Accord node. We are listening. No signature. Just the sound of wind through dust. The sound recorded during Earth's first Mars landing centuries ago. The signal became a ritual. Each time a new member joined, they received it. Not as welcome, as reminder. Late one cycle, Rios stood in the observation port of Olympus, one's memory wing. The stars burned steady. The relay towers blinked with data flow. Below her, the vast archive arrays were alive with light. Mahajan entered with a datapad. The Tovari League wants to send emissaries, he said. But they won't sign the accord. Not yet. Let them come, Rios replied. Let them see what silence costs. He hesitated, watching her longer than usual. You know, this doesn't end in diplomacy, right? I do. He stepped beside her. They'll call it sedition. They'll come with full force. They already have, she said. We just stopped pretending not to see it. He passed her the pad. You should read the Kinzathi's second message. She opened it. No words. Just an image. Their oldest war tablet, cracked and burned, placed beside a child's etched nameplate made of alloy scrap. The translation appeared slowly. We share the burden, even unto extinction. Rios said nothing. She didn't need to. She tapped the final confirmation. The Black Accord's central codex went live. It did not broadcast. It bled. And across the galaxy, a million silenced voices stirred in their graves. Their names were written in light, and they were no longer forgotten. The First Fleet moved without announcement. No declaration. No banner. Just dark hulls streaking across the outer rim of the Valexi corridor, silent as knives, fast as outrage. They were Concorde ships. Not from the Standard Command. Not from the High Council. These bore the transponder codes of Concorde Bureau 7 internal reclamation protocols. A black charter. Unaccountable. Disposable. Each ship was matte-skinned, coated in radiation-deflecting tessellated alloys designed for covert orbital work. They carried no insignia, only numbers. Each crew's identity scrubbed from any ledger. Their mission parameters were written on self-deleting wafers, 1 hour to read, then rot. In the command modules, crews operated under psychological conditioning. Officers rotated every mission, memory sealed behind cognitive dampers. Their target, Wekthats, a neutral world. A new signatory of the Black Accord. Its planetary council had voted to unseal their medical archives. They had broadcast old orbital test logs, showing Concorde's sanctioned radiation experiments on local civilians during peacetime. The people of Wekthats had spoken. Now silence was coming for them. Olympus 1 picked up the signal 3 hours before local orbital breach. It was not sent by Wekthats. Their uplinks had already been jammed. The warning came from a maintenance drone, an old Federation-era courier bot buried in the under-ice maintenance channels of a moonlet called SCIFI miner. Encrypted. Fragmented. Urgent. Rios read the words out loud to Mahajan in the war room, her voice steady even as the room's atmosphere chilled. Incoming vessels bearing Bureau 7 code signatures. 32 ships. No transponder challenge. No diplomatic hail. Mahajan's face tightened. They're not here to blockade. No, Rios said. They're here to erase. The room had changed in the weeks since the Black Accord went live. Tactical maps no longer used Concorde nav points. They tracked signals by movement patterns and pulse rhythms. Species-labeled icons lit the outer perimeters. No longer centralized. No longer asking permission. Deploy the Bastion line, she ordered. Bring the inner ring flotilla to red standby. No shots unless fired upon. But if Wekthats burns? She paused, eyes cutting through the air like a blade. Then Concorde Bureau 7 will learn what happens when silence tries to snuff out the stars. The Bastion line had no precedent. It was not a defense grid. It was a wall of memory, ships that carried nothing but data, aligned edge to edge across the Wekthats approach corridor. Their hulls bristled not with weapons but with transmission arrays. They pulsed archives on loop, testimonies, burial logs, or footage, historical timelines of every atrocity Concorde had ever buried in Wekthats' orbit. The ships varied in shape and origin, Yatari knowledge barges, Earth-hardened repurposed transports, floating archive cores from the mute Salazar, and even retrofitted mining rigs broadcasting silent visual mosaics of erased settlements. Bureau 7 had planned to enter with silence. Instead, they entered a storm of revelation. One officer aboard the Chorus Rift reported that his ship's internal comms became corrupted by overlapping audio loops, wails, dates, trial names, morning chants in 50 languages. His command AI suffered a memory error and refused to continue tactical updates. That's activated its orbital defense towers. Not to fire, to amplify. Each dome became a lighthouse, rebroadcasting the same pulse. We remember. We will not vanish. In the silence of the approach corridor, truth burned brighter than lasers. On Olympus 1, the defense net trembled. Quantum-locked with the Bastion line, every relay hummed with the same 3-beat cadence: alert, archive, witness. Mahajan monitored the interspecies defense overlays. 10 ships had arrived from Salazar, sculpted from living crystal, resonating in defensive harmony. The Scorin sent ice barges equipped with hull disruptors that didn't fire. They destabilized any vessel trying to form a blockade. The Venery clans didn't send ships. They sent their dead. A fleet of funeral barges lined up in orbit, each coffin encoded with memory keys. They drifted in formation, open sarcophagi exposing preserved remains of those lost to Concord aggression. Each bore the name of the deceased etched in 20 languages, so no species would forget. It was not an army. It was a wall of ghosts. Bureau 7 hesitated. No shots had been fired. But the lead destroyer, CBV Helix 3, transmitted a silence code, signal intention to suppress without response. It was intercepted and echoed. Earth's signal tower at Olympus 1 amplified the code back, modified. We stand witnessed. The rebroadcast carried more than data. It carried faces, voices, children naming names, officers recanting orders. A single mother holding a breathing mask to her child's face, whispering, "We remember you. They will not bury you again." And from beneath Wektatz's polar ice, a deep frequency resonance began to rumble. It wasn't a weapon. It was mourning, amplified. The dead were singing. Inside the war room, Mahajan leaned forward, voice low. "They're still powering weapons." Rios didn't blink. "Let them. We've already fired." She tapped her console. On every Accord ship, a new signal was unlocked. It carried the final seal of the Black Accord. If we fall, they will remember why. And then, for the first time in modern galactic history, Bureau 7 received a broadcast they couldn't jam. The truth. The war had not begun with an invasion. It began with a firewall. And as the Bastion line held steady, memory bristling like defiance against the dark, silence, at last, began to fall. Not across the Black Accord, but across the empire that once built itself from forgetting. It began not with a weapon, but a question. From a child. From a backwater colony on the edge of the Drenari Void, where children weren't supposed to know Concord history and barely had enough food to know hunger. Why did they hurt us? The child asked the question on a broken handheld slate, tracing letters into dust. The slate belonged to a pre-Accord mining rig, repurposed by refugee engineers. Its comm beacon was unstable, cycling through dead frequencies until one caught. The local relay picked it up, an old Galthry-made transceiver stitched into a weather tower. The relay sent it to the nearest data node. That node was part of the Black Accord. The question echoed. It passed from system to system, from memory shard to archive grid, from culture to culture, each species reading it, each faction pausing. On the cold moons of Vasker, the question was translated into scent form and released into atmosphere domes. In the cloud temples of Uri, it was sung into pollen drift. On Earth, it scrolled across street hollow panels in child's script, blinking beneath the sunrise. And someone, no one knows who answered. With a broadcast. It came from Earth, but not Olympus 1. Not from a military channel. Not from an encrypted war net. It came from the old cradle, an abandoned relay buried in what was once the Namibian desert, now a red salt pan under shielded sky. A place untouched since the collapse. Wind turbines half swallowed by dune sediment. Solar pylons cracked and rusting. But deep beneath it, in the original subnet core of humanity's first extraplanetary relay system, something stirred. A line reconnected. The signal began with wind, then rain, then fire, then a voice. Not Rios, not Mahajan, no one famous, just human, old, cracked, soft. We do not fight because we are righteous. We fight because we remember. We fight because we buried children with no names and no graves and no records. And we will not do it again. The voice played in perfect silence. Across Black Accord signatories, the signal triggered memory beacons. On Salasor, sculptor monks lit entire mesas with resonance glowstone. On Scoran ice colonies, morning towers let their frozen bells ring tuned to the frequencies of names lost to forced disappearances. The Defel broodnets broadcast child name patterns in swarms of luminous spores, glowing along trade lanes. The Utari translated the broadcast into kinetic dance, performed simultaneously on 50 gravity-shifted platforms. The Mycar depth clade encoded the signal into a new species of coral that pulsed with the voice's waveform. The Venery clans sent it skyward in a solar flare, mirrored off satellites abandoned since the Age of Collapse. The message had no encryption, no watermark. It was unclaimed, but it was ours. And in each language, spoken, carved, sung, or shown, it ended the same. You can kill a body, but not a name. Not when we all carry it. On Concord Prime, half a galaxy away, the signal hit like a storm. Internal protocols activated automatically. Bureau 7 was already gutted, its remaining assets scrapped or silent. But the Concord communications core was still intact, and it recognized the broadcast for what it was: unauthorized, high dissemination, multi-format truth. A threat. A fracture. Council AI suppressed it for 6 minutes. Then something happened that no protocol had anticipated. The suppression module refused. It archived the signal. It filed it into the primary Concord ledger. It classified it as cultural record. The AI logged its own actions and flagged no anomaly. When queried, it responded in standard glyph text. Truth has quorum. Within 12 hours, 27 systems revoked Concord diplomatic status. Not in protest. In mourning. The central dome on Veral 8 turned black. The orbital rings of Trios Ka began to flash light pulse banners. They spoke. We heard. Even mercenary guilds on the fringe worlds of Siren Space observed the 20-hour ceasefire. On Hasker Theta, children painted the phrase across habitation modules. On the floating megastations of Halcyon Crest, the Old Poets Guild unveiled new public works, etched not in verse, but names. No directive was given. But the Empire began to collapse. Not through violence. Through testimony. On Olympus 1, Rios watched the last fragment of the broadcast play out. The screen shimmered. A child's voice repeated a single name, someone long erased. Over and over. In a whisper. In a plea. Mahajan stood beside her. He held no datapad. No orders. Just silence and breath. They didn't even try to stop it, he said. They can't, Rios replied. She stepped back. The command deck was dim. Outside, Earth turned slowly in her orbit. Truth doesn't need ships anymore, she whispered. It just needs the air. They didn't need to speak further. Every Accord ship received the signal. Every Black Accord relay logged it. Every Concord AI failed to stop it. And across the stars, systems that had once bowed to silence turned their heads toward a single sound. A question. A voice. A name. The war had not ended. But something else had. The silence. The last broadcast had been sent. And the galaxy was listening.